You ever wonder about all those unwritten rules we follow every day? I mean, are we all just playing a part from some script we were handed, or are we kind of making it up as we go? It seems like a simple question, right? But it's actually at the very heart of a really fascinating field in sociology.
So let's start where all the best stories do, with a mystery. We're going to dive into a real-world puzzle from back in the 1960s that, trust me, tells us something really profound about how our social world actually gets built.
And the puzzle really boils down to this question. Think about it. How does a simple belief turn into a hard statistic? We tend to think of stats as these objective, cold, hard facts, right? But what if they're not? What if, instead, they're the end result of what we already believe, not just a mirror reflecting reality? So, to dig into this, a sociologist named Cicourel found what was basically the perfect natural experiment. He looked at two cities in California right next to each other, and for all intents and purposes, they were identical. We're talking same kind of population, same economic situation, the whole deal. But there was one huge glaring difference. The official records, the statistics, showed that one city had a massive problem with juvenile delinquency, while the other, not so much. So the big question was, if these cities are basically twins, what on earth could explain this massive gap in the numbers?
So Cicourel digs in, right? He starts looking at the actual process on the ground. And he discovers that the police in that high-rate city, they all kind of shared this common sense idea. They had a theory that kids from broken homes, single-parent families or unstable households, were just naturally more dangerous. And this wasn't just some abstract idea. It had very, very real consequences. Because the police believed these specific kids were trouble, that's who they focused on. So those are the kids getting stopped, getting detained, and, you guessed it, getting convicted way more often.
And boom, there's the answer to the mystery. That common sense belief the police had, it wasn't just a lens they used to see reality. Oh no, it was a tool that actively shaped reality. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their belief created the very statistics that then turned around and proved their original idea was right all along. Wild, right?
Okay, so this whole story is actually the perfect gateway into the field of study that looks at exactly this kind of thing, which, of course, brings us to our next section. It's called ethnomethodology. I know, it sounds super academic and complicated, but the main idea is actually pretty simple. It's just the study of the methods that regular people, that's the ethno part, use in their day-to-day lives to make sense of everything and create a shared reality. So, let's tie this right back to our story about the two cities. That common sense theory the police had about kids from broken homes, that was the ethno method. It was their everyday practical method that literally created a social fact, a high rate of juvenile delinquency. But okay, this brings up a huge question. If we're all using these methods to build our social world, where do the methods themselves even come from? And, well, this is the exact point where the founders of this whole field had a major disagreement. And this isn't some new argument either. We're talking right from the get-go. As you can see from this source text from way back in 1979, the field pretty much split down the middle into two very different camps, each led by a major thinker.
So yeah, this is the question that drove them apart. Are these social methods something we have stored inside our brains, kind of like a mental rulebook we all share? Or is it all something we're constantly performing and creating together, right here, out in the world, in the moment?
And here they are, the two big opposing views. On one side, you've got Cicourel. Yep, the same guy from our two cities story. And he's arguing it's all about a mental blueprint inside our heads. Then on the other side, you've got Harold Garfinkel, and his whole take is that social order is a non-stop public performance. All right, so let's dig into that first idea, Cicourel's take. For him, if you want to understand social order, you've got to look inside our heads.
Cicourel basically said that we all walk around with this built-in set of interpretive procedures. Think of them as the basic rules for social life. For instance, there's the reciprocity of perspectives, which is just our default assumption that you probably see the world more or less the same way I do. Or the etc. assumption. That's how we just fill in the blanks in a conversation without needing every little thing spelled out. It's like we're all running the same basic social software. And here's the key idea, the big analogy he used. He compared these internal rules to grammar. Think about it. Once you know the rules of grammar, you can create a nearly infinite number of new, correct sentences. Cicourel argued these social rules work the same way. They let you generate the right social response in pretty much any situation, even one you've never been in before.
But Harold Garfinkel, he thought that was completely wrong. For him, looking inside someone's head was basically a waste of time. He said the real action isn't happening in our minds. It's all happening right out here, in the open, on the social stage.
See, Garfinkel's argument was that social order isn't some preloaded blueprint we're just following along with. Nope. It's something we are actively, constantly doing. We are accomplishing order, moment by moment, through everything we say and do, to make the world seem orderly.
His study of how juries work is the perfect example of this. He found that jurors didn't do what we think they do, logically weigh all the evidence and then come to a verdict. It was the other way around. They pretty much decided on the verdict first, and then they worked backward to build a story, to assemble the reasons that made it look like their decision was the only logical outcome of following the rules. They were performing order after they'd already made the choice.
And this quote from him just sums it all up perfectly. He's basically saying, why are we even trying to look under the skull? There's nothing interesting there except for brains. What he means is, forget what's going on in our heads. Everything we could possibly need to understand social order is right there in front of us, and what people are actually saying and doing.
So, there you have it. Two really powerful, completely different ways of seeing our social reality. One says it's all built from an internal blueprint. The other says it's just one long, improvised performance. So, why should we care? Why does this academic debate actually matter in the real world?
Well, it matters because this gets to the absolute core of how we manage to live together. Are we all just running on the same basic social software, and that's what keeps society from falling apart? Or is social order actually way more fragile than that? Something we have to constantly work at, constantly perform for each other, every single day, just to keep the show on the road.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. The next time you're out there following a rule, waiting patiently in line, making small talk with a barista, just stop and ask yourself, am I just accessing some deep internal blueprint, or am I putting on a performance? Am I acting out rule following so that I and everyone around me can believe that this little moment is normal and orderly? The answer might just change how you see things.